Hello and welcome to Indus News live from Islamabad. I'm Meher Sher and these are the headlines. Pakistan has called for an orderly and responsible withdrawal of foreign troops from Afghanistan. Responding to media queries, Foreign Office spokesperson Zahid Hafiz Chaudhry said Islamabad believes that there is no military solution to the Afghan conflict. This comes after the Taliban warned of increased attacks if the U.S. fails to withdraw troops by the 1st of May. The United Nations has warned of a heightened risk of atrocity crimes in Myanmar. The warning comes after the death toll from Saturday's crackdown on anti-coup protesters rose to 141. Meanwhile, the military has killed 2 more people as the demonstrations against the February 1st coup continue across the country. In Bangladesh, dozens of people have been injured during violent protests against Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi's visit to the country. Clashes between police and protesters erupted during a nationwide strike over killing of 10 people in anti-Modi demonstrations. Earlier, the demonstrators blocked the main roads and railway tracks in different cities. Armenia's Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan says he will resign next month in order to hold early elections in June. He has been under pressure to step down over his handling of last year's war with Azerbaijan. India has recorded nearly 63,000 COVID-19 cases overnight, the highest single-day tally since mid-October last year. The country has also registered the highest single-day death since Christmas, with 312 dead since yesterday. In Pakistan, the government has decided to further tighten restriction amid rising coronavirus cases. Pakistan's daily cases hit a 10-month high, with almost 4,800 people tested positive and 57 dying overnight. The virus has infected more than 126 million people, claiming at least 2.7 million lives around the world. Well, those were the headlines. More news in detail after a short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. And now for the news in more detail. Pakistan's Foreign Office has called for an orderly and responsible withdrawal of foreign troops from Afghanistan. The remarks come after the Taliban warned the U.S. against missing a May 1st deadline for the withdrawal of foreign troops from the country. More details in this report.
Under last year's deal with the Taliban, the U.S. promised to withdraw all American troops from Afghanistan by the 1st of May. In return, the Taliban pledged to renounce violence and enter into the intra-Afghan peace talks. But President Joe Biden on Thursday said it will be hard for Washington to meet the deadline. One of his top generals told the Congress that Afghanistan's military forces need American assistance to successfully counter the Taliban. In response, the group warned that it will resume attacks on foreign troops if they fail to leave the country. Meanwhile, Pakistan stressed the need for a responsible troop withdrawal in order to avoid a vacuum. Responding to media queries, Foreign Office spokesperson Zahid Hafiz Chaudhry said Islamabad believes that there is no military solution to the Afghan conflict. Now, all eyes are on Biden as he has to decide whether his country will leave Afghanistan by the 1st of May or stay put.
Meanwhile, Afghanistan's top peace negotiator, Abdullah Abdullah, has accused the Taliban of not fulfilling their commitment to a reduction in violence. Abdullah says it will be a big miscalculation if the Taliban think they can overrun the country by war after the withdrawal of U.S. troops. More details in this report.
In an interview, Abdullah said, for successful negotiations, the ceasefire is not a precondition, but an absolute necessity. On the 1st of May deadline of US pullout, he said the Doha deal is conditional. Abdullah said the US committed to withdrawing troops in return for the Taliban agreeing to reduce violence significantly. He added, if both sides do not utilize the opportunity of inclusive peaceful settlement, there is a risk of war continuation. Meanwhile, the Taliban have blamed the Kabul administration for killing 20 civilians in Eastern Khost province. In a statement, the group called on the UN mission to impartially investigate this civilian massacre and punish the perpetrators.
The United Nations has warned of a heightened risk of atrocity crimes in Myanmar. The warning comes after the death toll from Saturday's crackdown on anti-coup protesters rose to 141. In a statement, UN Chief Michelle Bachelet called the military action shameful and brutal. She said the world community has responsibility to protect the people of Myanmar from such crimes. Earlier, a dozen countries signed a declaration condemning the use of lethal force against civilians. Meanwhile, the Myanmar military has killed 2 more people as the demonstrations against the February 1st coup continue across the country. More than 440 civilians have so far been killed by the military. And in Bangladesh, dozens of people have been injured as violence spread across the country on the 3rd day of protests against the visit of India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi. At least 11 protesters have been killed during clashes with police so far. More in this report.
Prime Minister Narendra Modi's 2-day visit to Bangladesh was marred by massive protests and rallies held by Muslims. Angry protesters called out India's Hindu nationalist leader for stoking communal violence against Muslims. He was in Bangladesh to attend its Golden Jubilee celebrations of independence. Speaking at the ceremony, Modi confessed to his participation in Bangladesh's struggle for independence. He boasted that he had been imprisoned for the cause. He also paid homage to the fighters who took part in the war and planted a sapling to commemorate their struggle. This has once again reaffirmed Islamabad's stance on New Delhi's involvement in severing Pakistan.
Indian forces have martyred 2 more civilians in occupied Jammu and Kashmir's Shopian district. The occupying troops have killed more than 300 people in the occupied valley during the 600-day siege. The youth were targeted during a siege in the Wangam area of the district. Indian troops held the entire population of the area hostage in one of its inhuman so-called cordon and search operations. They are carrying out house-to-house search in the area. The military operation was going on till the last reports came in. All parties Hurriyat conference said India is trying to suppress the Kashmiri struggle for right to self-determination through violence. And Armenia's Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan says he will resign next month in order to hold early elections in June. He has been under pressure to step down over his handling of last year's war with Azerbaijan. Protests broke out against Pashinyan in November when he signed a pact to end 6 weeks of fighting for Nagorno-Karabakh. Under the deal, Yerevan agreed to hand over swathes of territory to Azerbaijan, which many in Armenia see as a national humiliation. And the Arab coalition says it has destroyed 2 explosive-laden boats of Yemen's Houthi rebels and 2 drones. The coalition says it is taking the necessary operational measures in accordance with international humanitarian law. In a statement, the coalition said the boats were to be used in an attack from the Hodeidah port. It added the drones were aimed at southern cities of Saudi Arabia. This comes days after U.S. Special Envoy Tim Lenderking returned to the region to push for a nationwide ceasefire. Sudan's government has signed an agreement with a rebel faction to guide future peace negotiations in a bid to end multiple internal conflicts. The agreement was signed in Juba between Head of State General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan and Sudan People's Liberation Movement. The accord lays out priorities including unification of armed forces and the establishment of a secular state with freedom of religion. UN Special Representative for Sudan, Volker Perth, welcomed the development and termed it an important step towards peace. Sudan's transitional government has been engaging in peace talks with rebels over the past 2 years after the ouster of ruler Omar al-Bashir in 2019. Two suspected suicide bomb blasts have rocked a Catholic church in the Indonesian city of Makassar. The police say 14 people have been wounded in the explosions, which come on the first day of the Easter Holy Week. A police spokesperson said there was a congregation underway inside the church when the blast occurred. Talking to the media, the spokesperson said two suspected bombers are believed to be the only fatalities. Police said authorities are looking into which radical networks the bombers came from. They said authorities are investigating whether the attack was linked to recent arrests of suspected militants. No group has claimed responsibility for the attack so far. Brazil has recorded nearly 3,500 COVID-19 deaths for the second day in a row and close to 86,000 infections. Globally, the virus has infected more than 126 million people, claiming at least 2.7 million lives. More on the pandemic in this report.
The governments around the world seem to be in a race to administer maximum vaccine doses and bring their countries back to normalcy. Health officials have rolled out more than 510 million coronavirus vaccine doses globally, but the deployment of jabs has been glaringly unequal, with the US accounting for more than a quarter of the global total. More than 50 million people in the United States have been fully vaccinated, while about 97.7 million have received at least one dose. Still, the country's tallies of new COVID-19 cases and deaths have started creeping up in the last few days. In the south, experts warn Brazil's coronavirus situation is likely to deteriorate more as they forecast the nation's death toll will pass the US by the end of the year. But in Sao Paulo, young Brazilians find it hard to stay at home or maintain distances, forcing police actions.
This
is yet another operation to raise awareness among these young people that they should not crowd together in times of the contagion. We are going through a very difficult period lacking ICU beds, and these young people insist on going out to have fun.
In Europe, the situation appears to be improving for the United Kingdom as the NHS has passed the milestone of administering 25 million first vaccine doses, while over 2.5 million people have now received their second dose. But France admits the situation is critical and added 3 more departments to the 16 already under tight restrictions. In once hard-hit Spain, some 5,000 music fans in Barcelona attended a rock concert after rapid COVID-19 tests. Health authorities approved the trial, which, if successful, could provide a route to recovery for the ravaged live music industry in Spain and beyond.
I believe that today we have made one thing a reality, which was to show the world that culture is safe, that things can be done well, and by doing them well, concerts like this, one of 5,000 people, can be carried out, which has been perfect at all times in safety and in quality.
The Philippines say it will reimpose tougher measures in the capital of Manila and nearby provinces in order to fight a surge in the infections. Meanwhile, Hong Kong says an initial investigation by Germany's BioNTech into its vaccine did not show any obvious systemic factors during packaging. The use of the vaccine was suspended in the city and neighboring Macau this week.
Meanwhile, Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan has urged the nation to practice caution amid a sharp rise in coronavirus cases in the country. In a televised message, he said the third wave of COVID-19 is more severe than the previous ones. He said people must follow all SOPs as the country can't afford a complete lockdown. Meanwhile, the government has decided to further tighten restrictions in several districts of the country. Pakistan has reported 57 deaths and over 4,000 cases for the fourth consecutive day. There have been over 14,000 deaths and nearly 5,500 infections. And Hindus across the world are celebrating their cultural and religious festival of Holi today. The event signifies the triumph of good over evil and is also known as the Festival of Spring. Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan has greeted the country's Hindu community on the occasion. In Pakistan, Hindus are celebrating the day amid strict observance of COVID-19 protocols. Meanwhile, in India, this year's celebrations are being seen with skepticism as gatherings disregard the record spike in infections. The The country has recorded nearly 63,000 cases overnight, the highest single-day tally since mid-October last year. The health ministry said with 312 deaths, single-day mortality figures were also at their highest since Christmas. More stories after a short break. Stay with us. We're back. Some of the world's most iconic landmarks plunged into darkness to mark this year's Earth Hour. The Worldwide Fund for Nature started the event in Sydney in 2007. Earth Hour is now one of the world's largest grassroots movements for the environment. This year's event highlights the link between the destruction of nature and increasing outbreaks of diseases like COVID-19. In Pakistan, Prime Minister office turned off its lights to reiterate the country's commitment to preserving nature. Famous landmarks in cities such as Athens, Rome, Berlin, and Rio de Janeiro also turned off their lights. People filmed and cheered as the lights went out in Moscow's Red Square and the iconic Eiffel Tower in Paris. In Berlin, an activist dressed as a giant panda, which is the symbol of the WWF, switched off the lights on the city's Brandenburg Gate. Saudi Arabia has unveiled a campaign to tackle climate change and reduce carbon emissions. The initiative has been announced as energy giant Saudi Aramco faces scrutiny from investors over its emissions. Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman said the Saudi Green Initiative is aimed at reducing emissions using renewables to generate energy by 2030. His statement added that the world needs to go much faster in combating climate change. The prince said the plan also includes planting 10 billion trees in the coming decades. He called for tackling desertification, which poses an immediate economic risk. Saudi Arabia is facing the loss of $13 billion annually due to sandstorms in the region. Meanwhile, China's capital, Beijing, has been shrouded in thick dust carrying extremely high levels of hazardous particles. Climatologists say the second sandstorm in 2 weeks is due to the winds from drought-hit Mongolia and northwestern China. The storm reduced visibility and forced pedestrians to cover their eyes as gusts of dust swept through the streets. Beijing's official air quality index reached a maximum level of 500. Earlier, China Meteorological Administration issued a yellow alert for Beijing, warning the city of the sandstorm. The Met Office says Beijing might face more sandstorms in April due to unfavorable weather. Egypt has set up multiple rescue plans to dislodge the giant container ship blocking the Suez Canal. Osama Rabi, chairman of the Suez Canal Authority, says it remains unclear when the vessel will be refloated. At a press conference, Rabi said 14 tugboats are trying to dislodge the stranded vessel named Ever Given. He said the stern had begun to move on Friday night and that the rudder and propeller had started working again. Some 9,000 tons of ballast water stored in tanks to stabilize the ship has been removed to help lighten the vessel. He added that work is underway around the clock to get other ships through. Libya says an oil spill near Dahra field in the country's north has been brought under control. In a statement, the National Oil Corporation said technical teams have managed to halt the leak. It added the leak did not affect production operations. The cause of the leak has not been confirmed. Dahra oil field is one of the oldest in the country and has the daily production capacity of over 100,000 barrels. We'll be back after a short break. Stay with us. We're back with the latest in business. Most major stocks in the Gulf have gained as hopes for a global economic recovery boosts investor sentiment. The Dubai Share Index led the gains, ascending nearly 0.5%. Benchmark indices of Saudi Arabia, Qatar gained marginally. Abu Dhabi's bourses traded fractionally above the flat line, but mostly flat. Kuwait Premier Index drifted slightly lower, with National Industries Group slipping. In football World Cup qualifiers, Cristiano Ronaldo stormed off the pitch after he was denied a clear stoppage time winner as visiting Portugal were held to a 2-2 draw by Serbia.
The home side fought their way back into the match from 2 goals down in Belgrade. Diogo Jota netted twice for Portugal, but Alexander Mitrovic and Filip Kostic leveled for Serbia. The Serbs and Portugal both have 4 points in Group A, with Luxembourg third on 3 points. In Group E, leaders Czech Republic were held to a 1-1 draw by Belgium. Romelu Lukaku cancelled out Lucas Prowitz's opener to save the match for his side. In another contest, Belarus beat Estonia 4-2 to move into third place behind the Belgians. Meanwhile, Group G leaders Turkey thrashed Norway 3-0 to extend their lead. Ozan Tufan scored a brace for Turkey, and Kagler Soyuncu added a header to outclass the Norwegians.
In mixed martial arts, Francis Ngannou has knocked out Stipe Miocic in the second round to capture the undisputed UFC heavyweight title in Las Vegas. The bout was a rematch of their 2018 meeting where Miocic dominated Ngannou over 5 rounds for a unanimous decision victory. In the night's co-main event, Brazilian contender Vicente Luque claimed victory after finishing Tyron Woodley in the first round. Earlier rising bantamweight star Sean O'Malley earned a third-round knockout against Brazilian Thomas Almeida. There was also a notable victory for welterweight Abubakar Nurmagomedov, who won his first UFC win. Meanwhile, in cricket, Zimbabwe is set to host Pakistan next month for 2 tests and 3 T20 internationals. All matches will be held behind closed doors at Harare Sports Club. Pakistan will travel to Zimbabwe after playing 3 ODIs and 4 T20 internationals in South Africa. Zimbabwe have not hosted international cricket since Sri Lanka toured in January last year. In October, Zimbabwe toured Pakistan and lost 2-1 in the ODI series and 3-0 in the T20s. And American Scottie Scheffler has earned a spot in the semifinals at the World Golf Championships match play event in Austin, Texas. The 30th seed ousted 3rd seed Jon Rahm of Spain to join Matt Kuchar, Victor Perez, and Billy Horschel in the Final Four. The 24-year-old Scheffler went up early, grabbing a 3-up lead after the first 5 holes. Rahm got 2 back with birdies on numbers 7 and 9, but Scheffler finally pulled away with birdies at 10 and 12. He then closed the match with a final birdie on 17. Scheffler will now face number 52 seed and 2019 runner-up Kuchar in the semifinal. In the second semi, 31st seed Frenchman Perez will take on American Horschel. In horse racing, Mystic Guide has won the $12 million Dubai World Cup, beating out the field in a strong spirit finish. The winning horse was trained by Mike Stidham and ridden by Luis Saez. The race kicked off after a slight delay as one of the horses threw off its jockey. At the start, Mystic Guide settled in 3rd behind Hypothetical and eventual last-place finisher Capizano. It remained there for the first half, but passed Capizano into the second while moving into the far turn. Hypothetical stamina also faltered in the final stretch, and Mystic broke away with 400 meters left. Chua Wizard snatched the 2nd place, while Mani Kaur finished 3rd in the contest. In National Basketball Association, Donovan Mitchell scored a game-high 35 points to help Utah Jazz beat the Memphis Grizzlies 126 to 110 points. The win comes as 2nd straight for the Jazz against the Grizzlies in Salt Lake City.
Jordan Clarkson chipped in with 28 points while Rudy Gobert finished with 16 points for the Jazz. Meanwhile, San Antonio Spurs dominated Chicago Bulls 120 to 104 to snap a 4-game losing streak. Jakob Poeltl scored a career-high 20 points, followed by DeMar DeRozan adding 17 for the Spurs. In other fixtures, New York Knicks edged a severely short-handed Milwaukee Bucks 102 to 96 points, while Los Angeles Clippers downed Philadelphia 76ers 122 to 112 at home.
And now it's time to take a look at the latest weather updates from around the world. Well, that's all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at indus.news.